Hi, this is Civilized Raccoon, and this is 7 things I like about Civ 7. It's my take on Civilization 7 and what works for me. Now, this is the first of what I hope will be many episodes about the game, but in the meantime, I'm kind of new to this, so please be patient for my, technological faceplants. If things about this video seem unfinished and unpolished, I promise to fix them with a series of, you know, well planned updates. On an unrelated note, there have been plenty of complaints about Civ 7 since its early release. One of them is the unappealing UI, the fact that things are so hard to find, even in the Civlopedia, and that, well, for a guy like me in my advancing years, the small print is really hard to read. And the idea of changing civs upset a lot of people too, going from the civ you know and love in antiquity to something that seems totally unrelated in the exploration era. And related to that is the jerky era changes that upset a lot of people. The fact that you could be in the middle of a major war and suddenly find yourself in the modern era. The other complaint is that the game just isn't challenging enough, that the AI isn't up to the task, or that the gameplay itself isn't that complex, which is yet another complaint. That the game is so streamlined, it's been oversimplified for the new player, somebody who doesn't have a long history with the Civilization series. But overshadowing all of this is the idea that it's just not Civ anymore. That somehow the game has lost its roots. I guess that's the best way to put it. Now, that contrasts with my own experience. I've been playing divorce inducing hours of the game. And meanwhile, the subjective experience of playing the game is not a new thing to the series. Now, at the same time that I'm enjoying the new game, I do miss some things from the previous incarnation, Civ 6. For example, there's the great works of art gallery, where you have the best art and music and literature of the time, well, of all times, really. And, we have, who do we have here? We have Van Ryn, we have Van Ryn. Okay, let's not all see the same faces. Beatrix Potter, that's quite the contrast when you think about it. Vincent van Gogh, Peter Rabbit, oh yeah, there you are. Oh, Machiavelli, that's a fine little bit of foreshadowing, isn't it? There's another thing I miss from Civ 6 is the Hall of Fame. Look at that, well, mostly empty Hall of Fame because I tended to return to a lot of the same leaders time after time. But it was still nice to have a record of my accomplishments, however infinitely repeatable they were. And right now, I mean, in Civ 7, I'm just using file cards to keep track of who I use and with which civs. And then we have another assortment of people that, well, are a little more colorful, and I'm talking about the governors. The governors, it's a part of the game I liked. I think it's really necessary. I'd like to see them come back in some form, although maybe not these particular guys, if you know what I mean. Now, there is one thing I won't miss. Um, well, you'll see. Yeah, the World Congress. I always found it a big game interrupter with the drop down menus about things I didn't care about. But it was here where I often fell behind to someone going after a diplomatic victory. Too often, I had to get a diplomatic victory just to stop them. So I had a lot of default Diplo wins. The upshot is, I loved Civ 6 and still tinker with it, maybe not with this place, but I wanted something new, just like I do in the wake of every Civ game. This brings me to some of the things I like about Civ 7. Yeah, and one of those things is the so called janky era changes. The truth is, I never paid too much attention to eras in Civ 6. They came and they went, had some effects, I moved on. But they're a lot more obvious in Civ 7, as many players have complained. The truth is, though, I like the broad tabulations at the end of each era, and I like the resets and figuring out who am I now with this new civilization, whichever one I happen to choose from the selection I'm given. And how do I have to switch up my game? Meanwhile, the developers had done a lot to switch up their game. Part of that was with the plethora of new leaders that had never been in a Civ game before in Civ 7. Now, one could argue that with all the other changes to the game, the development team should have stuck to well-known leaders in Civs. But they included several rookie leaders, some of whom were not of the political variety. Although non-political leaders had been around before in Civ games. Look at Gandhi from the very beginning in Civ 1. Where, oh, where is Nuclear Gandhi? I do miss him right now. And we also had Gilgamesh in Civ 6, for example. And he isn't even a real person. We had a fictional character in there, even though he was one of my favorites in that game. So this probably contributed to the sense of overly newness that players experienced. Some disorientation in terms of, gee, who do I pick? I don't know most of these guys. But the rookies here have made an impact, and some are among my favorites. The fact that some of them are cultural leaders or science leaders and so on is, for me, a welcome adjustment to how the game approaches the great people concept. Another aspect of the game that I really like, despite my not being all that militarily inclined, is the commander system, which is really streamlined, and I admire that. In Civ 6, you had to move all the units individually across the map, and that could take some time, and it was kind of annoying and fiddly, actually. Now you can bundle them up in the loving arms of the commander unit and, well, send them speedily on their way. The promotion system is impressive too, with multiple promotion trees, although you probably won't use all of them in a given game. It's nice to have them there for the strategic choices. And the combat itself is easy to understand and yet allows for a fair amount of complexity, given the tight terrain constraints that you can end up with in any given location. Resources in Civ 7 are more tangible, but I'd go so far as to say they're even more fun. You can trade them between settlements, restricted by, the city versus town designations, and you can get more food or more production or more happiness to settlements that need them. So you can build up a town more quickly, you can rush some builds, or prevent a revolt from happening in a particularly unhappy little hamlet. You have a greater feeling of control when you can move resources around, or at least I do. And on a related note, despite my anti-capitalist tendencies, the overall economic victory is possibly the most fun of the bunch. And for some reason, I don't know if you have experienced this as well, but it's been the most consistently easy one for me to get. With the city-to-town continuum, you have choices to make about which settlements to develop versus which ones to convert to towns. Then you have decisions to make about what type of town each one should be. Which cities do your towns provide resources for? I like the variety of options. Plus, this is a more historically accurate portrayal of how civilizations operate. Still, the recent meta for the game proposes that having all cities is the way to go, just like it's always been in previous Civ games. I could see the developers tweaking this a bit to make towns more vital to winning the game. Okay, so maybe this seems condescending about building placement makes you think, but it does make me think because I used to be a plunk 'em down if you got 'em kind of guy in terms of building mechanics. But this aspect of the game is a natural evolution from what Civ 6 gave us in the district mechanic. Civ 7 is simply, if you like, built on this. And there are a lot of discussions online about adjacency bonuses for buildings and what should go where. And I am catching on, and maybe someday I'll actually play online or something drastic. But right now, I enjoy putting more thought into the overall design of each city. It's hard not to think of influence as a currency, just like gold. It's hard to find in the early game, but it's worth harvesting wherever you can find it, as we all know. And there are leaders whose bread and butter comes down to how they use and manipulate influence. And they're some of my favorite leaders currently in the game. And I like how it determines your relationship with independent states. That's one of my favorite bets. It's easily one of my very favorite parts of the new game. Now, there's no diplomatic victory path yet that influence could be used for, obviously, but influence makes me want to use diplomacy anyway as a way to leverage other types of victories. And I guess that wraps it up. We don't have any. Oh. Oh. Well, yeah, I guess there's more than seven things I wanted to say about the game. Um, I like mementos because they're not overpowering on their own, but when you combine them with leader abilities and then civ abilities, the possibilities really start to open up. And then consider there will be more leaders, more civs, and more mementos to create even more combos that we don't even have any idea of yet. Mementos and scheming over them, and it fills a lot of my brain power. And then you have the concept of leveling up leaders and leveling up the player, even if the result is merely addressing additional cosmetics. Uh, there are these little bits that have been added to the game that create new possibilities and that suggest further development into entire systems. Here's the short of it. I think that the changing of civs throughout the game adds to the strategic choices you can make. Given the possible combinations you can now make within the game, I think there is more complexity, not less. Now, I'm still learning new approaches every game, as I think all of you are. As to whether or not this is still a Civ game, well, look at it this way: it's still all about history and possible variations, and it's still all about strategy in an asymmetrical game. Now, that might describe a number of games, but I think it's still very much this game as it always has been from the beginning, in some ways. Anyway, thanks for sticking around. Leave a like if you like, and I'll see you next time.